So we're going to talk about existential psychology, which I think students typically find either fascinating or overwhelming, or not overwhelming, but maybe a little depressing. But I hope not. I hope you'll find it fascinating. Um, so so existential psychologists and humanistic psychologists both kind of have a very different focus. And one of the things you need to understand is that existential psychology has its roots in the 1950s, and humanistic more in the 1960s, but both really are really come into their own in the 1960s and 1970s. And so I want you to think about that cultural time when you're thinking about these theories. And so they both focus on what's called phenomenology and the idea that the individual's experience is all you need to know to understand the person. And so we're really just interested, go back way back to our different kinds of data. We really are just interested here in self-data and the idea of self-narrative that we've talked about before. And the idea here is that as the person experiences the world, that is the world that is relevant to understanding their personality. And so I want you to take a moment and just think about these ideas. And so even if you pause the video here and really think about these, and these are going to line up with your reflections that I asked you to do. And so make sure you do that reflection for existential psychology, and then there's another one to go with humanistic psychology. But the ideas that I want you to pay attention to here is that purpose is not given to you. You have to create it. That life should be examined to make life worth living and to make you kind of a whole, healthy person. The idea that an authentic existence relies on the need for you to create your own meaning. The idea that this is not going to come from someplace else, that you're going to create your own meaning. And that most people, when asked to make a choice, would often say they would rather live in a meaningful way than to be wealthy. Obviously, I think people would like both, but if they have to choose, they're going to choose meaning over wealth. So to talk about these ideas a little bit more, hopefully you've reflected on them a bit. But existential psychology at its core requires that people ask themselves, what is the nature of existence and what is the meaning of life? But according to existential psychologists, there is really only one healthy way of trying to answer that question. That existentialists insist that we face the fact that life is without an external or an externally given purpose, and that really a healthy personality means accepting that and then creating your own purpose. And they talk a lot about this idea of authentic existence, which is really to live authentically means to create your own meaning, not to borrow meaning from other people or to borrow meaning from external things like groups that you belong to or even the work that you do. The work might be part of your purpose, but that let me correct that. Your work could be about your meaning if work feels meaningful to you. But if your work doesn't feel meaningful and what you're doing is simply earning money and showing up every day, then having that create your sense of who you are is not authentic. And so the idea here is that if you live authentically, that you'll have a healthy personality based in honesty and insightful decision making. And I think, I have a client of mine that I think of whenever I talk about this. She is always very focused on the idea that she would be happy if, and it's always external things. She would be happy if she could be in a relationship. She would be happy if she had a job that made more money. She would be happy if she was recognized by other people for her competence. And a lot of our therapy has been my efforts to get her to see that she really needs to on her own, right? And so it's been, my efforts to get her to see that if she's going to be happy, if she's going to have an authentic existence, though I don't use those words, that she needs to create a sense of meaning for her own life and not wait for it to be given to her by other people. And so you can think some about people you know that live like that, or even some of you who might live like that. And to be honest, when we talk about existential psychology and we talk about humanistic psychology, some of the things that these psychologists require for a healthy existence are going to be unlikely to be seen in young people. That often we need life experience and maturity before we get here, though that's not always true. And I can think of some young people I know who live very authentically and very internally driven lives, even at a very young age. But maturity does help with this. Um, and so, right, so when I think about that client, people who live like this have lower levels of depression, they have better mental health overall, and even if they have a biological vulnerability to depression, they cope with that depression more effectively, and manage to live life despite the depression more effectively. And so I want you to think about how all of this that we've talked about relates to some of the big 5 traits we have talked about so much this semester, and to think about somebody who's living authentically, who has an internally driven sense of purpose and meaning, and then where they might fall on each of these 5 traits. And that's something we can talk about more in the online discussion, so that we can, we can explore that more. But I'd love for you to just think about that some now. Okay, so I will see you guys in the live discussion and in the next video.